What's up, Steeler fans? Welcome back to another episode of, well, I guess I'm welcoming myself back. It's been some time since we've done a daily show. We're going to start doing that again. Welcome back to State of the Steelers. This is Inside the Huddle. I don't remember what I used to call this uh, show. I think it was the Inside the Huddle, huh? Well, welcome back to the Huddle. So, like I was saying, as of here recently, I've been a little bit MIA, and I apologize for that, guys. I had a significant injury to my arm and work and my other podcast that I do, the DT show, kind of take up much of my time, but I'm going to get back into it. And we're going to be reacting now on more of a daily basis. Well, Tuesday through Friday. Moving forward, Monday, I'm on stillcurrentnetwork.com and Still Current Network, the YouTube channel with The Hangover with Shannon White. You'll catch me every Monday there. But Tuesday through Friday, you're going to catch me here doing a 10-minute segment or so on the Pittsburgh Steelers and some news that may have been brought. And today we're going to talk about a few things. First and foremost, that we're going to talk about is apparently the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have decided that they're going to be doing a joint practice. Now, this is going to be leading up to their preseason game in this upcoming preseason. And I think there's a couple of things that we can take away from this. One, I think this is a huge indication that Aaron Rodgers will probably be a Pittsburgh Steeler. Now, I know someone might say, how are you going to jump from a joint practice to Aaron Rodgers? Well, here's why. In preseason, you can't control, your quarterback getting hit like you can in practice, right? And you're going to want to build some chemistry with your players, and you're going to want to be able to control that that potential hit factor on your quarterback, especially if your quarterback's a 41-year-old, four-time MVP, Super Bowl champion, and Aaron Rodgers. So I think that this is a huge indication that that's probably one of the reasons why the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to do this. Plus, they have some other players that they probably want to, control the situation as far as injury goes and limit that aspect. DK Metcalf being another player who's new to the team that you want to have out there meshing up against other players and other teams, building in that chemistry with your quarterback, with limiting also the big hits, limiting the safety coming over here over the top and taking his head off, or a young guy trying to make the team and show up in those type of situations. So I think this is imperative because of those type of situations, and to me, this is another indication. Plus, I think Gary Dulac came out here recently on a show saying that the Steelers probably are anticipating signing Aaron Rodgers here in the near future. He said that if they do not sign him, that the Steelers would bring in a veteran quarterback to back up Mason Rudolph. And I'm all for it. If Aaron Rodgers ends up not signing, I'm good with with Mason Rudolph being the starter. I think what we all saw in 2023 at the end there was a huge boost in confidence of what his capabilities are with the players around him, with good players around him, and the Steelers organization behind his back. I thought he did fairly well, a lot better than the quarterbacks that we've seen since. I think maybe Russell Wilson has had his moments, especially against the Cincinnati Bengals last year, where he really, put it on them. But, outside of that one performance, maybe two performances that he had, I think Mason Rudolph showed the best performance at the quarterback position in some time, since probably Ben Roethlisberger, maybe 2020 season, before he had a knee injury in 2020 against the Cowboys. And the rest of that season, although they won majority of their games and they went on that 11-0 run, up until that game, you clearly could see he wasn't the same quarterback. Mobility was an issue. I was there actually at that Cowboys game during the COVID season, and he ended up getting hit right in the side of the knee right before the half. Mason Rudolph came in for a couple plays, and then Ben came in the second half, and he just wasn't the same guy after that. His mobility was completely gone at that point. But I digress. I'm comfortable with Mason, but all indications are that Aaron Rodgers is going to sign. Now, when is he going to sign? You know, I think it's going to be after minicamp. If I had to make a guess or prediction, it's going to be after minicamp, before training camp. Now, the reason why I think it's going to be after minicamp is because, well, OTAs are voluntary. DK Metcalf signed, he didn't show up or hasn't shown up to this point, so it's not a big deal. Even for a new player, it's not a big deal for something that's voluntary. Minicamp, on the other hand, is not voluntary. So if you're not going to sign because of a training or a practice that you need to be at, you're not going to not sign for the voluntary ones just to not be at the voluntary meeting. You're going to not sign because you don't want to be at a mandatory meeting. The noise that could create if he were to sign and then not show up for mandatory minicamp. So in my opinion, the fact that he hasn't signed already, which he could have signed at any point and not been at OTAs, tells me he's probably not going to sign until after minicamp and before training camp. Now, I could be wrong, and if he signs tomorrow or the next day, I'll be the first one to come up here and say, hey, I was wrong about that. But I think it's going to end up being after minicamp if I had to take a guess. But do like sharing that the Steelers' backup plan is another veteran quarterback. What does that say about the confidence in Will Howard being QB number 2? Being that guy, if Mason Rudolph were to go down, that you need to come in, spell hopefully just a little bit of time until the quarterback's able to come back in. I think that's it's taking a lot of pressure off his plate, even by putting in another player there, and it allows the Steelers to develop him without that pressure, and that added. If Mason starts not performing well, you're going to get the Will Howard chance and those type of things, and if he's not ready, it could ruin his confidence, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I just think that the Steelers want a red shirt year for Will Howard, and I think that's what they're going to end up getting out of him this year. But Aaron Rodgers, I think, like I said, I think he's going to end up signing. Last thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that it's been reported that TJ Watt has a pretty significant contract offer from the Pittsburgh Steelers on the table. Now, I was talking about this with Shannon White on The Hangover. I want to see TJ Watt. I want to continue to see him as a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's right here, right behind me. I want to see him to stay as a Pittsburgh Steeler. There's what I call the TJ Watt effect. Shannon would come in and he told me about how, his stats weren't the same last year, especially towards the end of the year, and, his playoff record and his stats in the playoffs. And I completely get it. I think there's more context, which is what I said on the show, being the offense never really put in their part, so the defense has been fatigued and injured at the latter part of the season, which has resulted in a poor performance, not just by TJ Watt, but by his surrounding cast as well in most recent years. TJ Watt is not the reason why the Baltimore Ravens were able to put 300 yards in the ground against the Steelers in the playoffs last year. It wasn't just him. There was a lot of people that were at fault there. And a lot of that reason is just, my opinion, fatigue and injury due to the offense's inability to maintain possession of the ball and or put up points in a consistent manner. And so with that being said, I think that if the Steelers can start getting the ball going on the offensive side, which I think they have a better chance to do so, and I'm going to talk more about this on tomorrow's show, as far as the fitment between the players that the Steelers have now and the scheme that the Steelers want to run, and how that's going to put in a better performance for the offense in 2025. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you get that for tomorrow's show. But going back to TJ Watt, the Steelers' record without TJ Watt, since he's been a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, is really poor. I think they've only won maybe 2 games without TJ Watt there, maybe 3, somewhere around there. I don't know all of them, but that's in his entire career. So what does that say? That says that the surrounding cast isn't able to do what they're able to do without TJ Watt taking the attention that he requires. Now, I know last year, They were doing a lot of chipping and stuff like that, and they were able to neutralize TJ. And this year there have been a lot of talks about moving players back and forth, and maybe perhaps even TJ around to get him some better, so that way he's not getting schemed out of position. And I'm excited for that. That's going to make the offenses be more honest and play more honest, and allow the Pittsburgh Steelers to not be so predictable, so to speak, when it comes to their pressures and which side that the offense needs to attack and how they need to attack it. So, with that being said, I think he needs to stay a Pittsburgh Steeler. How much are they going to pay him? I don't know. I mean, I think he's owed $28 million this year on his contract. He can hold out, obviously, but I believe that he has to play a certain part of his year in order for this year to count. So you can kind of force him to play on the $28 million contract minus X amount of games if he decides to take half the season off or whatever it is that he can take before it counts against him. And then you can franchise tag him. And so when you look at what what that would cost you over the next 2 years, you really don't need to go above that if you're the Steelers organization. Now they're going to respect him and his play and pay him a formidable amount, but you also have that in your back pocket to say, hey, they can force him to play on his last year's contract and franchise tag him if they choose to. That would still be significantly less money than if they decided to pay him $40 million this year and $40 million next year. That's $80 million versus $28 million this year, and I don't know what the franchise tag would be next year, but let's just say they match, because I think it's an average of the top five. But let's just say at that point some of the players get played, and $40 million is that average. Well, I mean, you're still saving yourself quite a bit of money. That's $68 million versus 80. I mean, that's $12 million in your pocket. And so, obviously you're going to end up with a disgruntled player. You're going to end up going down the same path that you may have gone with, like, for instance, Le'Veon Bell, although I think that TJ Watt at that point will be 32 years old. In the next 2 years, he's 30 now. It's a little bit different of a scenario, and I think that's what the concern is this isn't the second contract. This is the third contract. And how much does he have before Father Time really takes over? I mean, we've seen some years where TJ's been really good. He had the sack tying record back in 21, I think it was. And then he had an injury, and then he came back. And then last year was up and down due to injury as well. But even in 21, when he had the 22 and a half sacks, he missed a lot of that year because he held out. He had a lot of soft tissue issues at the beginning of that season. So, with that being said, obviously he could have had a better season, but this year he's older. It's not the same. He's not the same guy. He's not 20-something years old anymore. I think you want to get this deal done faster or sooner than later to make sure and ensure that he's not getting hurt. I still don't think you're going to play him much in the preseason whatsoever. But to have him out there getting ready, stretching, doing, football activities, which would prevent, those soft tissue issues if he just goes straight into a live football game. Week one like he did back in 2021, which although it ended with a great year with the total amount of sacks and an unbelievable season, an MVP, a defensive player MVP season, he still had a lot of injuries that year. And so you obviously want to have him in there as soon as possible and have him happy. Where does he land? For me, I think the Steelers will probably feel more comfortable with, whatever this year is, and next year mainly or fully or mostly guaranteed. I don't want to say you're going to have 2 full year guaranteed, but I wouldn't be surprised if they guarantee whatever it is that he gets this year fully, whatever he gets next year mostly, maybe fully. And then the next year is probably when you're looking at a significant drop in guaranteed monies given his age at that time. At this point, I think you want to take this 2-3 years at a time. 2-year extension on the year that he has now, which would be this year plus 2 years, which is 3 year in totality. I think that's probably somewhere where the Steelers will feel more comfortable. Not to mention, and I brought this up on the show, on The Hangover, that if the Steelers were to give him somewhere around 35, 38, 40, let's just say they match, Myles Garrett, that still would be less percentage wise than what TJ Watt got when he signed the 28 million a year contract a few years back. Percentage wise, he if he got the same, money per year average, you'd be looking at 42 million a year. And so, even if he gets somewhere less than that, it's not to the same caliber as the contract he got on the second time around. And so, even at 35, 38 million, I think looking at where the salary cap is going to end up going in the future, you know, we're seeing more and more of these pay-per-view events, whether it's Amazon, Netflix, whatever, Peacock now, that you're having to subscribe to these pay-for-services. That's only going to equate to some more money for the NFL and to the salary cap. And so percentage-wise, it may be look like a lot of money this year, and it may be a lot of money this year. But it's not going to cripple the Steelers in the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if this deal gets done sooner than later. I hope it gets done sooner than later. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Please hit the like button, subscribe, ring that notification button. I'll see you guys tomorrow when we talk about the fitment of the offensive players and Arthur Smith and what I expect to see from this offense. Until next time, peace.